Thank you, Jane. When you were, is the microphone on? Hello, microphone? Yeah, when you were talking about something bad happening, I thought maybe if you'd overrun instead, you know. Thank you very much. In our last talk of the day, I would like to welcome Joshua Rayner, who is here to talk about how does the NHS go to net zero, which of course is a hugely important and hugely difficult topic to be able to take on, particularly in the environment that we have at the moment in a difficult NHS. Joshua's going to be talking about PPN and what that means, and also talking about the government-required social value score that's going to be used within the NHS. And really looking forward to your session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Is there the clicker thing as well? Sorry? The clicker? And that just goes... Wonderful. Amazing. Thank you for everyone for attending. I know this is the last speech of the day, but thank you for the next 15 to 20 minutes of your time. My name is Josh. I'm here from Ecology, and we are a sustainability company. And today I'm here to talk to you about the government framework PPN 0621, which is helping people get towards net zero if you're an NHS provider. So a quick bit of housekeeping. I'm going to run through these slides here. So I'm going to tell you a bit about Ecology, the challenge with the UK government's net zero proposal, the requirements of PPN 0621 in terms of the value scoring, why Ecology Zero can help you, and then how we actually intend on supporting people that want to work with Ecology for this particular framework. And then if time, we've got questions at the end. So a quick bit of background on Ecology. So the Ecology is a UK climate platform. As you can see, we have done various different types of climate funding over the last 5 years since we've been around. We currently work with over 24,000 businesses, which has been an amazing turnaround for us, being less than half a decade old. The original focus of the company was really around funding climate impact. And as you can see here, we've helped fund over 85 million trees, 7,500 tons of carbon removed, 20,000 meters square of habitat restoration, and avoided 3 million tons of CO2. We also work with businesses of all size, from small SMEs right up to people like Oracle, AXA, and Lloyds Bank. The challenge that I'm here to talk to you about today is that, as you can see, it's a little bit small on these screens, is that the government is committed to reach net zero by 2050. As part of this, the NHS has also announced that they want a net zero target of 2045. And essentially what this means is that the NHS has started to implement a procurement notice to start suppliers on this journey so that everyone can reach a net zero collectively. Because as we'll see, when it comes to emissions, if you buy from someone else, your emissions are shared. The government created PPN 0621 to basically apply to all central government departments, executive agencies, non-government public policies in England, including the NHS. From April 2024, so this year, it increased in terms of the parameters and the scope. So any supplier to the NHS that's on a public sector framework now needs to supply a carbon reduction plan, which we'll go into details in a little sec. But essentially, this is now a mandated requirement for all tenders and over £5 million on all frameworks. The requirements of these carbon reduction plans is also set to increase in 2027. We are speaking directly to NHS England on exactly what those requirements are. But as you only do a carbon reduction plan every 12 months, and the potential for the 2027 one in terms of showing reductions against previous years is quite likely, the earlier you start this process in terms of data gathering, collecting information for your emissions report, and starting on that journey, the better off you're going to be for frameworks into the future. So what is the actual challenges for businesses like yours who are trying to get onto these framework agreements? Carbon accounting is really hard. I don't know if anyone's done it. If you tried to do it yourself, I can see this lady nodding. It's a really tricky business, and essentially one of the biggest things, and one of the best ways to think of carbon accounting is it's actually data collection. You're basically turning data into emissions factors and then publishing them. And that, as you can see here, data collection and knowing exactly where to start is a major challenge. And one of the biggest challenges that we hear is that it's only often SLT who have access to all the data requirements. So it could be operations, it could be finance, it could be the CEO, depending on the size of the company. So the cost of roping these people in to report on this gets quite high in terms of internal capital. So outsourcing it to companies like ours is a really good option in terms of to keep those costs down and positively impact the bottom line and also help you secure the framework agreements that you're trying to get onto. Additionally, as a software platform, we are trying to create a subscription service where we work with businesses throughout the year to help with the implementation of these carbon reduction plans, opposed to that consultative element where you might only have a single interaction throughout the year, and then you're just left on your own for the next 9 months and not knowing how to actually implement the plan. So a little 101 in carbon accounting here for anyone who's not familiar. So there are these things called scopes. So scopes 1, scopes 2, and scope 3. These are the actual requirements for the current CRPs that you're required to report to get on this public sector framework. So scope 1 is your direct emissions as a company. So that is what you emit that goes directly into the atmosphere. As you can see here, it's stationary combustion, mobile combustion, process emissions, fugitive emissions. We handle all this for you, but this is just a good overview to see just how complicated it can be, even at quite a basic level. Scope 2 is probably the easiest for most companies. This is your indirect emissions from energy. So this is your purchased emissions from the grid, electricity, steam, and heating and cooling, which is basically air conditioning. And then scope 3, if you've ever heard anyone in carbon accounting talk about scope 3, it is the big bane of everyone's life. It's the big topic going forward. Scope 3 is just everything else. So for this specific requirement of the CRP, you're only required for these 5 elements of scope 3: upstream transportation, waste, business travel, commuting, and downstream transportation. The NHS England has been quite shrewd in choosing these 5 first, because these 5 of the 15 potential scope 3 categories are actually the ones that you're probably most likely to have the information for and not have to go out to get or try and ask particular providers for that data. So these ones should be readily available for most businesses. So in terms of why we're doing this and what we're trying to do in terms of helping customers for the public sector framework agreements is that, going back to what I said earlier, the data collection piece is easily the most difficult for customers. So by having a centralized platform where you can submit your data, you can get everything into the same place, formatted in the same way, rather than having multiple spreadsheets on different documents with different people, from sheets to Excel to a DHL outsourcing logistics doc. You can get everything into a single place where you know where it is. We also have the ability to bulk load any data in any format, which we can then turn into emissions factors. And additionally, as part of the way that we work with businesses, is that we've really come to understand it's that consultative guidance that people want. It's not just a platform where they can sit down and fiddle around for a few hours and get a number. They really want to be guided through the process in terms of understanding what they've got to do going forwards, how they can improve data collection in the future, and how they can actually start to reduce their emissions going towards net zero. Quick touching on this one here. So this, obviously, the first major step of any of this is the calculate stage. What we can do is we obviously measure scopes 1, 2, and 3. This is a snapshot of our suppliers and transactions tab that actually integrates directly into accounting software like Xero with an X. So we can import your expenses transactions, turn those into emissions, and then give you a final number, which means that we can then add that to your emissions report. We can also process any type of activity data that's required. And then also, we've got specific calculators for things like home working, rented vehicles, owned vehicles, like anything that's the more niche, the less likely you are to have a specific calculator for it. So therefore, we have this advanced support feature where we can basically turn any consumption-based data into emissions. And when I say consumption, it's how much of that thing have you done. This is much more of the consultative element, talking about it before, but you won't be able to see exactly what's written here. But the CRP that we produce for customers is really detailed in terms of the steps you're trying to achieve going forwards. So although you're not specifically graded on the plan itself, you're just required to produce a plan. By 2027, we've heard that people will be graded on the progress they've made in the last few years. So the earlier you start on an actual emissions plan and implementing it, the better position you're going to put yourself in 2027 and beyond. And also, it's a good thing to do going towards net zero generally. One of the first things that we've started seeing, and for most of the plans that we've been producing, is that for people's first report, almost all of the advice that we give them is around improving data collection. There's probably going to be some quick wins in there in terms to emissions, but mapping out your emissions requires good data. And if you don't have the data, we can make assumptions and come up with a number. But the better your data, the better the emissions result at the end. And the better the emissions result at the end, the better reflected it will be when you start making those actions and pulling those levers to reduce those emissions. So it is data, data, data at the end of the day, which is why people hate doing it, to be fair. So, and one final piece that we've got here is our Learn, which is our Ecology Academy. So this is our online platform where we dig into details around specific net zero concepts, understanding net zero as a sort of overarching theme. Then there's sort of business opportunities within that. And one of the things that we try to sort of get across to organizations is that doing a carbon reduction plan or an emissions reduction plan or measuring your carbon footprint is essentially an energy saving exercise. You're looking for areas of wastage, you're looking for areas where you can refine what you're spending, you're looking for areas where you can change your operations to reduce your emissions. And in a lot of instances, that means that you can reduce and save costs or change how you spend your money as a business. So how we can support you, feel free to grab me at the end and to get a card off me or just come and say hello or reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can help you produce your carbon reduction plan for PPN 0621. As part of that, the way that we work with businesses, as I said, is an ongoing subscription service to help you implement the plan throughout the year rather than just produce it and then never hear from you again like some consultants that we know. And additionally, yeah, we have the ability to sort of support you with your ongoing net zero commitment and any other questions that you might have in terms of data collection as you refine what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a wrap. Thank you very much for your great session, and thank you to everybody speakers today for what I think has been a really interesting and varied discussion today. There are drinks in the pub down the road after, and yeah, have a safe journey home, everyone.
Thanks very much, Joshua. That's all right. Pleasure.